Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going deep, like way deep, into something I think you're all pretty familiar with, your brain.
Yeah.
But especially, we're going to be looking at how you can actually rewire it
Okay.
for more happiness and love and wisdom.
Right.
We're going to be using excerpts from Rick Hanson's Buddha's Brain,
Okay.
which blends neuroscience and Buddhist teachings in a really fascinating way.
Right.
So let's get started.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I found really empowering about Hanson's work is this idea that, we're not stuck with the brain we're born with.
Right.
We can actually change it through experience.
Yeah.
And those changes can have, a huge impact on how we feel and interact with the world.
It's like we have this incredible power
Yeah.
to shape our own brains and, by extension, our own lives.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me a little more about how that works?
Well, on a very basic level, your brain has billions of neurons.
Right.
And those neurons are constantly talking to each other, forming pathways and patterns.
Yeah.
And the more you use certain pathways, the stronger they become.
Okay.
It's kind of like a path in the woods.
I see.
The more you walk it, the more defined it gets.
So the things that we think about,
Yeah.
the experiences we focus on, are actually shaping the physical structure of our brains.
That's right.
That's pretty amazing.
It is.
But I imagine it could also be kind of a double-edged sword,
Yeah.
right? If we're constantly reinforcing negative patterns of thought,
Totally.
those pathways become stronger too.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And unfortunately, our brains kind of have a built-in negativity bias, meaning that they tend to focus more on negative experiences than positive ones.
Really?
Yeah, and this made sense from an evolutionary standpoint.
Oh, okay.
Back when our ancestors needed to be hyper-aware of potential danger.
So our brains are basically wired to be Velcro for negative experiences.
Exactly.
Which made sense, I guess, for survival
Yeah.
back in the day.
Right.
But now, it seems like it just makes us overreact to everyday stress.
Totally.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Absolutely. Even
yeah.
though we're not, facing saber-toothed tigers anymore,
Right.
our brains still react to everyday stresses as if they're life or death situations. And this keeps our sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response in overdrive, leading to a cascade of stress hormones and ultimately more suffering.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how do we break free from this negativity bias?
Right.
Is there a way to rewire our brains to be more positive?
There is.
Okay, good.
And this is where I think the Buddhist perspective comes in.
Right.
Hanson talks about these 3 pillars of practice: virtue, mindfulness, and wisdom, which can help us break free from the cycle of suffering.
Right.
And these pillars aren't just, airy-fairy concepts.
Okay.
They actually relate to the 3 fundamental functions of the brain.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
All right, so we've got regulation, learning, and selection.
Okay.
So virtue, essentially, regulating your actions and words and thoughts, relies on your brain's ability to regulate itself.
I see.
Mindfulness, being present and aware,
Right.
shapes new learning and strengthens the neural circuits of attention.
Got it.
And wisdom,
Yeah.
making wise choices, is all about selecting what truly serves you.
So by cultivating virtue, mindfulness, and wisdom,
Right.
we're essentially upgrading our brain's operating system.
Exactly.
I like that analogy, but how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we actually do that in a practical way?
So Hanson suggests specific practices that can help us cultivate each of these pillars.
Okay.
For instance, one powerful practice he talks about is taking in the good.
Taking in the good.
Yeah.
I have to admit, sometimes I find those focus on the positive messages a bit cheesy.
Right.
So does this mean we should just ignore the negative stuff?
Not at all. It's not about ignoring the negative, but about making a deliberate effort to really absorb and internalize positive moments.
Okay.
It's like our brains are naturally wired to focus on the negative.
Right.
So we need to put in some extra effort to balance things out.
That makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like we need to train our brains to appreciate the good stuff
Yes.
instead of letting those positive feelings just slip away.
Right.
But what about those unavoidable first darts of life, as Hanson calls them?
Yeah.
Those painful experiences that we can't control.
Yeah.
How do we deal with those without getting completely swept away by negativity?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Hanson emphasizes that it's not about pretending that those first darts don't exist.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our reactions to those darts, what he calls second darts, are what really cause us to suffer.
So it's not the pain itself that's the problem.
Right.
It's how we react to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by that?
Sure. Imagine you stub your toe.
Okay.
That's the first dart.
Yeah.
Initial pain.
Right.
Second dart is all the negative thoughts and emotions you add on top of that.
Right.
Like, this always happens to me, or I'm such a klutz.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see how the second darts
Right.
can amplify the suffering.
Totally.
So how do we stop ourselves from throwing those second darts?
Well, one important key is understanding our nervous system.
Okay.
You know, our brains have evolved with this fight or flight response, which is controlled by the sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
But we also have this parasympathetic nervous system,
Okay.
which is all about rest and relaxation and recovery.
Okay.
And by activating that parasympathetic nervous system,
I
we can cool the fires of reactivity
like that.
and create a sense of inner calm.
So when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed,
Yeah.
we need to find a way to hit the chill button on our nervous system.
Exactly.
But how do we actually do that?
Well, there are many simple practices that can activate the parasympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
Hanson talks about the power of slowing down your breathing,
Well,
engaging in relaxation techniques like progressive muscle relaxation, and even cultivating a sense of safety and refuge in your mind.
I'm curious about this idea of a sense of refuge.
Yeah.
What did that look like in practice?
Well, it's about, identifying those people,
Okay.
places, or even ideas
Okay.
that provide you with a sense of peace and security.
Right.
It might involve, visualizing a peaceful place or connecting with a supportive friend
Okay.
or simply remembering a time when you felt safe and loved.
I see.
The key is to consciously tap into those sources of strength and comfort.
So when those first starts inevitably come flying our way, we can retreat to our inner sanctuary and recharge.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes we need to do more than just retreat.
Right.
Sometimes we need to take action. So how does Hanson's work address the whole idea of setting goals and taking charge of our lives?
Well, he talks about the power of intentions.
Okay.
It's about understanding what truly matters to you,
Right.
connecting your goals to those deeper values,
Okay.
and then aligning your actions with those values.
I see.
And he even suggests visualizing yourself,
Okay.
acting in accordance with your values,
Well-
even when faced with challenges.
So it's not just about setting random goals,
Right.
but about being intentional about how we're spending our time and energy.
Yeah.
And by visualizing ourselves succeeding,
Right.
we're actually strengthening those neural pathways that support our goals.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
It is.
But what about those moments when we feel stuck or overwhelmed or just plain blah?
Yeah.
Is there a way to rewire our brains to be more resilient in those challenging moments?
Well, Hanson talks about a practice called equanimity,
Okay.
which can be particularly helpful in those moments.
Equanimity.
Yeah.
That sounds like a complex concept.
It is?
Can you explain it in a way that's easy to understand?
Sure.
Okay.
Imagine watching a storm cloud
Uh-huh.
pass overhead.
Okay.
You can observe it without getting drenched in the rain, right?
Right.
Equanimity is similar.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that feelings come and go
Okay.
and that we don't have to get caught up in their drama.
I see.
This kind of mental detachment can be incredible freeing.
And helps you.
It helps you weather the storms of life without losing your center.
Okay, so we're learning to take in the good,
Right.
our fires,
Yeah.
set powerful intentions,
Yeah.
and cultivate equanimity.
Exactly.
It sounds like a pretty solid recipe for a more peaceful and fulfilling life.
I think so.
But what about love and compassion?
Yeah.
Does Hanson address those emotions in his work?
He does.
Okay.
And in a very insightful way.
All right.
He talks about these two wolves that live within each of us.
Two wolves. Okay.
The wolf of love
Mhm.
and the wolf of hate. It's a metaphor for the evolutionary forces that have shaped our brains.
Right.
On the one hand, we're wired for connection and compassion and cooperation.
Right.
That's the wolf of love.
Makes sense.
Yeah, humans are social creatures.
Right.
We need each other to survive and thrive.
Right.
But we're also wired for self-preservation and competition and even aggression.
Right.
That's the wolf of hate.
Right.
And as we've seen, our brains have a tendency to overemphasize threats,
Yeah.
which can fuel this wolf.
So we're constantly navigating this inner battle between love and hate.
In a way, Yes.
That sounds exhausting.
It can be.
Yeah.
But the good news is we have a choice in which wolf we feed.
Right.
By cultivating compassion and kindness and empathy,
Okay.
we can strengthen the wolf of love
Right.
and create more loving, fulfilling relationships.
That's a powerful image. But I have to admit,
Yeah.
sometimes I find this whole cultivating compassion thing a bit intimidating.
Right.
It feels like something you do in a yoga studio. Not in the real world.
Sure.
So how can we actually cultivate more compassion in our daily lives?
Well, Hanson emphasizes that compassion is not just a nice feeling.
Okay.
It's a skill we can develop, a neural circuit we can strengthen.
Right.
And the key to unlocking compassion is empathy.
Empathy.
Yes, it's about consciously tuning into the other person's experience,
Right.
paying attention to their actions and words and body language.
So it's about putting down our phones,
Yes.
making eye contact,
Bro.
and really listening to what people are saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
And here's the fascinating part.
Okay.
When we engage in that kind of deep listening, we activate mirror neurons in our brains.
Mirror neuron.
Yeah, these neurons fire both when we perform an action
Okay.
and when we observe someone else performing that action.
Wow.
So in a sense,
Yeah.
we're simulating their experience in our own brains,
Right.
which helps us understand and connect with them on a deeper level.
So practicing empathy can actually strengthen our capacity for compassion.
That's right.
It sounds like a powerful way to build stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
I agree.
This has been incredibly insightful so far. I'm really starting to see how all of these ideas, from the negativity bias to compassion, are interconnected.
Yeah.
But what about wisdom?
Right.
Is there a specific practice for cultivating wisdom?
You know, wisdom is less about a specific practice
Okay.
and more about an overall approach to life
Right.
that integrates virtue and mindfulness and compassion.
Uh-huh.
It's about understanding the nature of reality,
Okay.
seeing things clearly,
Yeah.
and making choices that lead to genuine happiness and fulfillment.
Got it.
And to get into that,
Yeah.
we need to delve a little deeper into the self.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
All right.
Let's dive into the deep end of the self.
Let's do it.
But first, let's
Okay.
take a quick break, and we'll come back to unravel the mysteries of the self in just a few minutes.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're back and ready to tackle this whole idea of self.
Oh, okay.
I have to admit, it's something I haven't given a lot of thought to,
Right.
but I'm starting to realize it's a lot more complex than I initially assumed.
Absolutely.
So what does neuroscience have to say about this idea of self?
Right.
Is there a specific part of the brain where the self, resides?
That's what's so interesting. There's no single self
Oh,
located in a specific part of the brain.
okay.
Instead, what we experience as self
Yeah.
is actually a collection of interacting systems and processes.
Okay.
Think of it less like a single entity and more like a network of different brain regions working together.
So it's not like there's a little me running the show up there.
Not quite. It's more like a symphony orchestra
Oh, I like that.
with different sections, the limbic system,
Okay.
the prefrontal cortex,
Yeah.
the memory centers, all playing their parts to
Wait.
create this experience of self.
So if the self is more of a dynamic process
Yeah.
than a fixed thing,
Right.
does that mean it's constantly changing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our sense of self is constantly evolving,
Right.
responding to different situations and experiences.
Makes sense.
And this is where I think the Buddhist perspective,
Okay.
which has been exploring the illusory nature of the self for centuries,
Right.
can offer some really valuable insights.
I'm starting to see how this all ties together.
Yeah.
If our sense of self is constantly changing,
Right?
then maybe clinging to a fixed idea of who we are
Yeah.
is what leads to so much suffering.
That's a key insight from Buddhist philosophy.
Okay.
It suggests that our attachment to this limited sense of self
Okay.
is often the root of our suffering.
I see.
By loosening our grip on this idea of a separate, unchanging self,
Uh-huh.
we can open ourselves up to a more expansive way of being.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we loosen our grip on this idea of self?
It starts with awareness.
Okay.
Pay attention to the ways in which your sense of self shapes your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions.
Okay.
Notice how it can lead to, clinging and craving and
Yeah.
ultimately suffering.
So you're saying we need to become more aware
Yeah.
of those moments when we're feeling insecure or threatened or defensive.
Right.
Those are probably signs that our ego is trying to protect itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by becoming aware of those patterns,
Right.
we can start to create some distance between ourselves and those reactions. Yeah. We can choose to respond with more compassion, both for ourselves and for others.
So we're becoming more aware of ourselves and how it influences our behavior.
Yeah.
But what happens when we start to see the self as an illusion?
Okay.
Does that mean we lose our sense of identity?
That's a common concern. Yeah. But from a Buddhist perspective, it's not about losing your identity. It's about expanding it.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that who you are is much more vast and interconnected than this limited sense of self.
So instead of being trapped in our own little ego bubbles, we can connect more deeply with the world around us.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful idea.
It is.
But it also feels very abstract.
Sure.
How does this actually play out in everyday life?
It can manifest in many ways.
Okay.
You might find yourself, feeling less reactive to criticism.
Okay.
More willing to forgive.
Right.
Or more compassionate towards those who are suffering.
I see.
You might start to see the interconnectedness of all things.
Yeah.
And feel a deeper sense of belonging and purpose.
It sounds like letting go of this fixed idea of self can be incredibly liberating.
It can be.
It opens us up to new possibilities for connection and compassion and joy.
Absolutely.
This conversation has really stretched my understanding of what it means to be human.
Good, I'm glad.
But we haven't talked much about the physical aspects of all of this.
Okay.
Does Hanson address things like nutrition and supplements in his book?
He does.
Okay. I mean, can we literally feed our brains to enhance our well-being?
Yes. There's an entire section dedicated to what he calls nutritional neurochemistry.
Nutritional neurochemistry.
Yeah.
That definitely sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
Right.
But I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah.
What kinds of foods can actually, boost our mood or improve our cognitive function?
Well, certain B vitamins, for example, play a crucial role in the production of neurotransmitters. Those chemical messengers that carry signals between brain cells.
So if we're not getting enough B vitamins, our brains might not be functioning at their best.
That's right.
Okay.
And the same goes for omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, and other essential nutrients. Right. They all play a vital role in supporting brain health.
So we need to make sure we're feeding our brains the good stuff.
Yes.
What about supplements?
Okay.
Are there any that can actually improve our mental and emotional well-being?
There's a lot of research being done in this area.
Okay.
And Hanson's book does mention a few supplements that may be beneficial.
Okay.
But there's also a very important cautionary note included.
Let me guess. Don't start popping pills without talking to your doctor first.
Exactly.
Okay, safety first makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've explored the negativity bias of our brains.
Right.
The power of taking in the good. The importance of activating the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
The illusory nature of the self.
Right.
And even the nutritional building blocks of a healthy brain.
Exactly.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But I'm starting to see how it all fits together.
Yeah, it's all interconnected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important takeaways is that we have more power to shape our own well-being than we often realize.
That's right.
By understanding how our minds and brains work,
we
can start to make conscious choices that support our happiness, love, and wisdom.
I agree.
Absolutely. It's like we've been given a whole new toolkit for navigating the challenges of life and cultivating a more fulfilling existence.
I like that.
But before we wrap up this discussion, I have one more question about wisdom.
Right.
You mentioned that it's less about a specific practice and more about an overall approach to life.
That's right.
Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Sure.
What does it actually mean to live a wise life?
That's a wonderful question.
Yeah.
And it's something that we could probably spend hours unpacking.
Right.
But if I had to distill it down to a few key principles, I'd say that wisdom involves cultivating discernment, equanimity, compassion, and action.
Okay. I like where this is going.
Right.
Break down those principles for me.
Okay.
What does it mean to cultivate discernment?
Discernment is about seeing things clearly.
Okay.
Without the distortions of our biases or attachments or fears.
Right.
It's about understanding the causes and conditions that shape our experiences.
Okay.
And making wise choices based on that understanding.
So it's about developing a clear and accurate perception of reality.
Exactly.
Both within ourselves and in the world around us.
Yes. And it's about recognizing that our perceptions are often shaped by our past experiences, our beliefs, and our emotional states.
I see.
Discernment helps us see through those filters and gain a more objective understanding of ourselves and our situation.
That makes a lot of sense.
Good.
So we cultivate discernment to help us see things clearly.
Right.
What about equanimity?
Okay.
You mentioned that earlier.
Right.
But I'm curious to hear more about how it relates to wisdom.
Sure. Equanimity is about learning to observe our experiences, both pleasant and unpleasant, with a sense of balance and non-reactivity.
Right.
It's about not getting swept away by the storms of our emotions, but instead remaining centered and grounded in the midst of life's ups and downs.
Okay, so discernment helps us see things clearly.
Yes.
And equanimity helps us stay grounded in the midst of life's challenges.
That's right.
What about compassion?
Okay.
How does that contribute to living a wise life?
Compassion is a powerful force that connects us to others and allows us to respond to suffering with kindness, understanding, and a willingness to help.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that everyone, including ourselves, deserves to be treated with care and respect.
So compassion is about extending kindness and understanding.
Yes.
Not only to others, but also to ourselves.
Exactly. Self-compassion is a crucial aspect of wisdom.
That's a beautiful reminder, especially in a world that often feels very divided and judgmental.
Absolutely. It allows us to acknowledge our own imperfections and mistakes without harsh self-criticism or judgment.
Right.
It helps us approach ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend.
So we've got discernment, equanimity, and compassion.
Right.
What about the final principle you mentioned? Action.
Yeah.
How does that fit into the picture?
Wisdom isn't just about contemplation or passive understanding.
Right.
It's about translating our insights into meaningful action in the world.
I see.
It's about using our understanding to create a more just, compassionate, and fulfilling life for ourselves and for others.
So it's about taking what we've learned and applying it to our daily lives.
Exactly.
Making choices that are aligned with our values and working to make a positive difference in the world.
Precisely.
Okay.
Wisdom isn't just a state of mind.
Right.
It's a way of being in the world.
Okay.
It's about embodying our values, taking responsible action, and using our understanding to create positive change.
Wow. That's an inspiring vision.
It is.
Discernment, equanimity, compassion, and action.
Yeah.
I think I need to write those down and put them on my fridge for daily inspiration.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And remember, wisdom isn't a destination.
Right.
It's a lifelong journey of learning and growing and evolving.
Okay.
It's about continually striving to live in a way that is aligned with our deepest values and our understanding of the interconnectedness of all things.
This deep dive has given me so much to think about.
Good.
It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this vast, fascinating landscape of the mind and the brain.
It is vast.
I'm really starting to see how these insights can help us navigate the challenges of life with more wisdom and compassion and resilience.
Absolutely.
But I'm also realizing that this is just the beginning of a lifelong journey of exploration and discovery.
That's right. There's always more to learn, more to explore, and more ways to use our minds to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life for ourselves and for others.
Well, on that note, we're going to shift gears a bit and explore another fascinating aspect of human experience. The nature of awareness itself.
Ooh, that's a good one.
We'll be diving into the latest research on how awareness is generated by the brain and how we can cultivate greater awareness through practices like mindfulness and meditation.
Sounds good.
So if you're ready to expand your mind
and
explore the frontiers of consciousness, stay tuned. We'll be back after a quick break to embark on this incredible journey into the heart of awareness.
Sounds good.
All right, so we're back and ready to dive into this fascinating world of awareness.
Yeah, you know, for centuries, the nature of awareness was really explored mainly through like philosophy and religion. But now neuroscience is offering some pretty incredible insights into how awareness is actually generated by the brain.
Okay, so this is where I always feel like I'm stepping into like a science fiction movie or something. So what exactly is awareness? From a neuroscientific perspective, is there a specific awareness center in the brain?
That's what's so interesting. It doesn't seem to be that simple. There doesn't seem to be like a single location. It seems more likely that awareness arises from like this complex interplay of billions of neurons firing across different regions of the brain.
Okay.
Like a vast interconnected network.
So different parts of the brain work together to create awareness.
Yeah.
Kind of like instruments in an orchestra.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
And this orchestral model really helps us understand how like different aspects of awareness,
That's
like
right.
perception, attention, emotion,
Yeah.
might be orchestrated by various brain regions all working together.
That makes sense. And this, I'm guessing, is where mindfulness comes in.
Exactly. Mindfulness is essentially about paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Right.
And when we practice mindfulness, we're actually strengthening those neural circuits that support attention and focus and self-awareness.
So by practicing mindfulness, we're essentially fine-tuning our brain's ability to, like, be aware.
Yes. And what's remarkable is that the research on mindfulness is really showing some pretty incredible results.
Really?
Yeah. Studies have shown that regular mindfulness practice can actually lead to physical changes in the brain.
Wow.
Particularly in areas associated with attention, emotion regulation, and self-awareness.
So it's not just a feel-good practice.
Right.
Mindfulness is literally changing the structure of our brains.
That's what the research seems to suggest.
That's pretty convincing evidence.
Yeah. And these changes in the brain seem to translate into real-world benefits.
Okay, like what?
You know, people who practice mindfulness regularly report feeling less stressed and more connected to themselves and others.
Okay, I'm definitely adding mindfulness to my daily routine.
Good.
Now, what about meditation?
Oh.
Is that basically just another form of mindfulness?
Well, meditation is definitely a powerful tool for cultivating awareness.
Okay.
But there are, many different types of meditation, each with its own unique approach and benefits.
Okay.
Some forms of meditation focus on developing concentration, while others emphasize cultivating compassion or insight.
So it's like there's a whole menu of meditation practices.
Exactly.
Each designed to strengthen, like, a specific aspect of awareness.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay.
And just like with physical exercise, the more we practice meditation, the stronger those awareness muscles become.
I've always been really intrigued by those mystical experiences that people sometimes describe having during meditation, like those feelings of oneness or transcendence.
Yeah.
Does neuroscience have anything to say about those experiences?
That's where things get really fascinating.
Okay.
Some neuroscientists believe that these mystical experiences might be related to changes in brain activity, particularly in areas associated with our sense of self.
So it's possible that meditation is actually like temporarily rewiring our brains to experience a more expansive sense of reality.
That's one theory.
Yeah.
And it's definitely an area that needs further research.
Okay.
But the implications are pretty profound.
Yeah.
It suggests that we might have the potential to access states of consciousness that go far beyond our everyday experience.
That's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It is.
I have to say, this whole deep dive has been an incredible journey.
I agree.
We've explored the negativity bias of our brains, the power of taking in the good, the illusory nature of the self. And now we're contemplating, like, the mysteries of consciousness and mystical experiences.
It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most important takeaways for me is that we're not just passive observers of our own experience.
Right.
We actually have the ability to shape our minds and brains in ways that can lead to greater happiness, love, and wisdom.
I completely agree.
Well, thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been my pleasure.
To our listeners, we encourage you to continue exploring these ideas.
Yeah.
Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep rewiring your brains for a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep diving deep.